Hi and welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board games. Today, for I think the last stream of the year, another casual Sunday. This time, I'm with Ray Weiss, who's a designer that some of you might know, and if you don't, we'll talk about what Ray has been doing lately in the wargaming space. And we also have with us Doug Miller, who's an historian. And who read a book about Thomas Müntzer, which is the topic of the game that we're going to talk about tonight.
Frankenhausen, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Unfortunately, Andy Drummond, who was the Müntzer specialist, is not with us at the moment. He may join us, but no, I'm more a military historian. But I wrote a book about Frankenhausen, which was the decisive battle in Thuringia at the time. So that's the bit I can contribute, if you like, from a bit of a wargaming perspective.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll be also able to provide a more also general context on what we're talking about, and hopefully Andy can join us a bit later on. But yeah, the game that we're going to talk about tonight is With the Hammer, which is the latest design by Ray, and do you want to talk to us a bit more about it, Ray? So maybe start by introducing yourself, and then we can talk about the game.
Sure. Okay. So, yeah, I'm Ray Weiss of Conflict Simulations LLC. It's a small publishing company. I've been doing it out of New York for the past 7 or 8 years, I guess now. And I wanted to talk to, talk with Fred. Sorry, I'm nervous. This is my first time doing this.
It's fine.
But,
don't worry. And if you want me to jump in and take over, please don't feel
no, it's
overwhelmed.
okay.
Yeah.
So I've designed a game on a topic I'm fairly passionate about, which is about the German Peasant War, which happened about 500 years ago this year. And one of its leading, protagonists, Thomas Müntzer. And this is a game I've been wanting to design for a very long time, but it only really came together in the last couple months. Maybe about 4 or 5 months, I finally had a vision for it and then put it together. And Fred has helped really make it what it is now. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
And maybe that's a caveat that I should talk about, just to talk about my potential biases, about what I'm talking about on the channel.
Right.
Yeah, something that I haven't mentioned. So originally, you wanted the two of us to co-design the game. Unfortunately, I wasn't really available when you were really working on the design itself, and I came in a bit later. And I mostly, I think, helped in the end, just refining some of the mechanics, occupying more of a developer role on this one, even if it's a more, I think, relaxed approach to development than what people might do for other publishers like GMT or something like this. So don't reach out to me to develop your games. I'm bad at it. In the case of this game, it made a lot of sense because we had a lot of discussions on an ongoing basis about the topic, about what you wanted to do, and I felt like I could potentially support. And so it's really interesting that we have Doug, who's been, I guess, helping you on some of the historical part. And maybe, Doug, I don't think that you are a gamer. I was wondering, how did you react when Ray reached out and talked about making a game about this specific topic? Did it sound weird? Were you excited? What was your reaction?
Well, just very interested, for sure, because I'm a bit obsessed about the whole thing. Probably a bit like Ray. No, basically I've been making dioramas about certain episodes during that occurred during the Peasants' War, in conjunction with the what you might call the Association of German Peasants' War Museums. So they've commissioned a number of my models. So I have a range of figures, which basically are wargaming figures, but I've used them to create scenes. But I've always wanted people to actually use them in games. But I've just never got round to kind of pushing it in that area. So actually, if I'm not mistaken, Ray, you first contacted me. I think you contacted Andy first about Munster and the Peasants' War in central Germany. But then we got initially into quite an exchange about certain aspects of what was happening in the siege of Munster, which occurred 10 years later. And then I think I might lose the plot here a little bit, but then there were questions coming about certain things that happened in Thüringen and particularly in Frankenhausen, which I wrote basically, I did a book about the Peasants' War, very superficial thing, back in around about 2000. And then I updated that, wanting to kind of look at, well, I'd already done a book on the Landsknechte, which are the mercenary soldiers that essentially had been employed by the princes to put down the peasants' uprising. And then I did a book on what it was like inside a campaign and inside a Landsknecht army. But unfortunately, that was mainly focused on the army of the Swabian League, which was basically the army that was deployed in the southern part of Germany. But I may have done that after I decided to write a book about a particular battle. I wanted to detail one of the major confrontations, one of the most decisive, if not the decisive one, at least as far as central Germany was concerned, which was Frankenhausen. And that was the demise of where Thomas Müntzer finally had to capitulate to the armies of George of Saxony and Philip of Hessen. And then just recently on a much more detailed book on the Peasants' War.
I think I linked that in the private chat, the Hellion book.
Oh yes,
Hellion.
And I think that what I'll do is I'll also put in the description the list of books that you mentioned, so people can also have a quick look after watching the chat. And just for people to understand, when we're talking about Andy, we're talking about Andrew Drummond, who made this book.
Right.
So just for to contextualize for people who don't know what we're talking about. I'll
just go and get my book and just put it up on the screen.
Yes,
so
exactly. That would be perfect. And so Ray, how was your relationship? So you reached out to Andy, you reached out to Doug. What were the questions that you asked them, and how did they help you actually refine your game? I'm going to put you in a nice. Okay.
So, I guess
thanks, Doug.
For a long time, I've been really fascinated by the period, and I've been vacillating between doing a game either on this or on the Siege of Munster, or Munster, to pronounce it correctly. I should. But and that happened about 10 years later. There's a lot of interesting similarities, but just people involved. But sorry, what was the question again?
So the question was really about how did you work with those historians, and what did they bring to you in the process of designing the game?
Well, they're being very gracious, and I sent them a lot of emails that were probably quite annoying, just asking questions about the war, and I guess kind of gesticulating about my design process in general. But eventually, they helped narrow down some of the topics that I really wanted to focus on, just like the places. One of the biggest tasks for me, I guess, in the game was like creating the map. And both Doug and Andy really helped with that, and just in terms of nailing down what the main cities were, which ones were important. Because that took me probably the longest amount of time, and the thing I was most worried about.
And you were also saying that you needed help for the flags itself, and it looks like the flags are quite insane for the era. So was it specifically with Doug that you worked on making sure that you had the proper flags for the counters and everything?
That's correct. And that book that he mentioned, the Frankenhausen book, which I also have a copy of. I could have brought it up too, but yeah, it has some of the dioramas that he mentioned, which are absolutely beautiful as well.
And I had a question for you, Doug. So you mentioned diorama, and I feel like diorama is also quite close in some aspects of figurine wargaming, which is pretty popular in Great Britain. And I was wondering if you, Doug, had like a background in historical figurine wargames, or did you only get into diorama just through the interest in history?
So I studied German. And as part of my study, I did a placement. I need to backtrack a bit. 1970, I was hitchhiking in Germany and discovered these wonderful figures in a toy shop that were made by a factory, a company in also Thüringen in a way, a place called Neustadt bei Coburg. Center of the toy industry, but they made these wonderful plastic figurines, which included Landsknechts and Janissaries of this period. And I kind of fell in love with them. And when it came round to having to organize a placement, I wrote to the company and asked if I could do a 3-month stint there. I mean, my university figured that I should be doing translation in the export department, but they actually put me on the 3rd floor where all the orders were made up. So I was doing fairly kind of routine work, you know. But the great thing about it was I came in contact through my immediate supervisor, who was the wife of a guy called Josef Ton. And I could talk at length about Josef, who was a wonderful man. But basically, he made the enormous, what they called Schaustücke or showpiece dioramas that went into the department stores that basically sold their figures. I mean, they were just wonderful. And he's become a legend since he died. There's a book you can get available through Figuren Magazine, which is a German magazine devoted to the type of figures that came out largely during this period, 60s, 70s, 80s, the collector's items now. So that, like, I wanted to be a figure modeler, right? When I finished that placement, and the trouble was, Joseph said, and I wanted to work in that company, and Joseph said to me over my dead body, because he really had been messed about by the management there, and so that didn't happen. I then ended up going into academia, but I kept as a bit of a sideline. I started to make figures, and I made them for a German company initially, and then a couple of UK firms. But they weren't. They were more 54 millimeter size, so they weren't really wargame figures as such.
Yeah, it was on the bigger scale. Yeah.
But one of the scales that this German company did, Hauser Lasterlin, was 40 millimeter. And some of the dioramas that Josef had made in 40 millimeter were just absolutely stunning. And that's kind of what attracted me to the whole thing. So I then did a bit of research. I thought I was taken by the Landsknechts, and I had a year off. I was working in Darmstadt as a language assistant, and decided to research a book which Osprey published called The Landsknechts in 1975, 76, something like that. That kind of was it. And then as years passed, I suddenly realized I couldn't get away from this period. I couldn't really get away from that year. I mean, I dabbled in one or two other things, right? But essentially, I was hooked. And in around about the year 2000, when I published the second Osprey title, which was the German Peasants War, I started a small range, which now consists of about 125 figures. It's just gone mad. But I've largely used the figures, right? I mean, you can use them for skirmish wargaming, and you can use them for role play gaming, or I don't quite work out the difference there, the subtleties of different types of games yet. But
it's the same DNA, basically.
Yeah, it's funny that you would say that, because they are coming from the same root. So in a lot of ways, those games are kind of in the same family.
I'll tell you why I kind of got a bit confused. There's a guy in Germany, and I forget his name now, Michael Klebron, that's his name. Now, he designed a game, and I think I might have mentioned this to Ray.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he designed a game. Yeah, he designed a game about the localized peasants' war, which involved a pastor called Anton Eisenhut. And he's become quite a specialist. But again, it's clear that he got like hooked up in the same way that I did and Ray did in this piece. It's so fascinating, right? And he basically designed this board game. And I was in touch with him recently because basically I'm trying to get rid of my figures. I mean, I've got all these blinking figures and I don't know what to do with them. and I sort of offered them to him, and he said, well, no, it's like a card game, board game. I don't use personalities in that way, which is a shame. So anyway, that's where I've realized there's like a difference between certain board games and other board games where, and this has really spawned an enormous industry of 3D Patreon kind of subscription where you and it's largely you have these individual personality figures that feature in certain board games. So that I think is where there's a bit of a difference occurred.
But I think what's interesting is that Ray's design, even though the scale is quite strategic, where you have bands of peasants and everything, you do have individualities. So I guess, Ray, you could have come up with actual figurines.
You could play this one with individual miniatures, essentially.
Yeah.
Because there's there's 4 personalities that you can play as in the game on the peasant side, and they're basically called peasant leaders. So you have either Thomas Müntzer, Bonaventura Kushner, Hans Sippel, and Heinrich Pfeiffer. So basically, nobody really knows anything about most of those people except for I think Müntzer and a little bit about Heinrich. But we can guess that both Hans Sippel and Bonaventura were both Landsnakes. I can't pronounce that word correctly for the life of me. Apologize.
Kirchner, yeah. Landsnake.
Yeah, there you go. So you could actually just use figures of those or like a generic preacher in the game, and those could actually... You could put those on the map because we just use pawns as like you would in chess. But if you really wanted to make your copy nice, you could actually play this with like actual, miniatures representing the people.
Yeah, and you have also the 3 noble leaders where where you could put the small figurine on top of the counter. That would be super nice, actually.
You could, yeah.
Yeah. So something to think about. If you get the game from Ray, you can also reach out to Doug, who's trying to get rid of some figurines, and maybe you can make yourself a deluxe edition of the game.
The one big problem I had, which is like come like a hammer blow, is bloody Brexit, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's really kind of messed me up. I used to go to Kulmbach, which is a biennial international figure show. And I was back there before COVID in 2019. And I wanted to go again this year. But I made the casual inquiry because I thought, well, I need to contact some other British figure manufacturers, if you like, about their experience with Brexit and how they're handling going to a show, and what they do about customs and that, right? And the woman the organizers of the show politely informed me that there were no British people going anymore. It's an absolute travesty, right? Because there's some cracking, British manufacturers and modelers who would like to display their stuff, and they may go as just guests, but actually exhibiting, not a chance. So that's been quite frustrating, Yeah.
It's frustrating for me because we haven't gotten our games in the UK either. So it's the only
really
we haven't gotten our games. Yeah, it's the only place.
Right. Yeah. Shame.
I think you can probably come up with an agreement with Second Chance Games in the UK, who's been pretty good at distributing smaller indie US publishers. But that's a discussion for another time. But I have a question. Yeah, no, that's fine. I have a question for you, Doug. Do you have near you some of those figurines that you can bring up to the camera, or?
Yeah.
when you look for them, I'm going to ask you, Ray, because we've been talking about the game, but we haven't really talked about the general context or the history about it. So people might have figured out that it's about the Peasants' War in Thuringia. It's somewhere in the 16th century. But can you give us a broad overview of what the game is depicting?
Yeah, so just to give some more general context about the conflict in the centuries leading up to it, there had been some like sporadic peasant uprisings. I think if some people have heard of like the drummer of Nicholhausen, that was like sort of like a poor people's revolt, I believe, in the 15th century. But there, 1525 was and 1524 was particularly a bad year of harvests, I believe, and people were more discontent than usual. Um, and you mix that in with the Reformation, and Germany was kind of a volatile place for, excuse me, much of the mid 16th, early mid 16th century. Um, and so what the game is depicting is sort of like just a small subsection of this larger war, because the larger war really covers all of Germany and into Austria through 1526, I think. So we're just looking at just like a fast and furious 2 week period of the war, in which there was a lot of like parlaying between parties, lots of negotiations, sort of people trying. There were attempts by the peasants to link up with one another, but they, part of it just being the 16th century and also just part of the luck of the draw, they all kind of ended in failure. I know Hans Sippel himself, I believe, went to one city, and once they let him in, he was quickly arrested and executed quickly after. So Müntzer ended up being executed, and this was a completely unsuccessful rebellion, and I think over or some 100,000 people died, and Doug can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, that's in the Peasants' War overall, 100,000.
Right.
They think that something like maybe 7,000 perished at Frankenhausen.
Oh wow, I didn't even know it was that much.
Yeah.
That's a lot for an insurrection. I was wondering, can one of you maybe clarify what was the whole dynamic with Martin Luther? Because Thomas Müntzer was also a theologian. So I was wondering what kind of interaction was there? Was there tension? Was there some aspects to which they were aligned or misaligned? Who wants to jump in? Ray, I saw
Doug
you.
is probably. I think Doug is better posed to answer that, but they were once allies turned bitter enemies, to put it shortly.
And
Doug,
yeah, well, I mean,
Müntzer was a kind of acolyte of Luther. Luther was, if you want to sum up Luther, he insisted very much on what was called sola scriptura, in other words, the words of the Bible, being the most important thing to hold on to and to live by. Müntzer was much more about arriving at a place where you became religious through in a way through your deeds and through your living. It was a much more kind of spiritual thing. But Müntzer was also quite a what's the word? Belonged to the millennium, not the millennials, but he was a
millenarian, right?
Millenarian, that's the word. The word escapes me at the moment. It's like, yeah, he believed in a coming apocalypse, right? And the other big difference, political difference, was, of course, that Luther did not want to overthrow the established order, whereas Müntzer threw down a challenge to the princes and saying, "You either join us, or we're having you," kind of thing, and incurred the wrath of the Earl of Mansfeld in particular, and then obviously George of Saxony, who was a Catholic. But Philip of Hessen was a Lutheran. And so you get this contradiction going on. But they obviously, the Mulhausen, which was where Pfeiffer and Müntzer were based, was seen as the kind of the epicenter of the revolt in Thuringia. And when the correspondence went back and forwards about what do we do militarily, the plan was to march on Mulhausen, but then they heard that Müntzer had been asked by, if you like, by Frankenhausen, the peasant band and the rebel band. There were miners, there were peasants, there were salt workers who'd all gathered in and around Frankenhausen and had asked Müntzer to assist. And he set off with about only 300 followers and some small, what they call card guns. I think the city of Mulhausen had only made available a few card guns to take to Frankenhausen, and basically the princes then made a beeline for Frankenhausen.
What would you say was the political objective of Thomas Müntzer with this insurrection? What was he trying to achieve?
Well, it was quite narrow in the sense that I think he reached out to the miners in Mansfeld and a bit further beyond in what's called the Joachimsthal mining area near the Czech borders, and they were having their own battles, if you like, not in a military sense, although it almost became a military conflict. But they kind of settled and didn't come. There would be pockets of miners who came to his assistance and turned up at Frankenhausen. But his aim was really to take Mansfeld, who was holed up in a fortress in Heldrungen, which is not that far away from Frankenhausen. And they were really worried. The princes were really worried, but they'd amassed a bit of an army there waiting for the arrival of George of Saxony, who would come all the way from Dresden. His plan then was really to kind of take that fortress eventually, and it was essentially regional, you know. I mean, one of the things you have to realize about the Peasants' War, and we often forget this, is most of the communication that was going on was done on horseback. And the thing about the Peasants' War, I mean, this is the communication between the princes, and you can just kind of imagine it. You know, you send the Pony Express off, right? You've just written a message to go to another commander somewhere, and then suddenly you have a change of mind. There's some new information comes in, so you've got to send somebody else chasing behind this person. I mean, there was the birth of, I think it maybe was already around, but you had this thing called Turn and Taxis, which was the birth of the, if you like, the Pony Express in Germany. It was the system of communication. But the thing about the peasants was, even though the 12 articles that were published in Memmingen, that was their manifesto, and it was printed. I've just seen a message there from Mike. I'll talk to Mike later on about how he can get it. Where was I? There was several reprints of the manifesto, and those articles were adopted by the different peasant bands and then amended slightly. So to that extent, you had a kind of uniform program that everybody seemed to be, coalescing behind. However, what you didn't have was any united military command, because these things, if you look at the temporal analysis of what was going on, things were kind of happening not really in parallel, and then they were, and then there was news of a major defeat of the peasants was then reaching other groups, and they decided, to come to some kind of compromise with the princes.
Well, that's what I always think was sort of the defining moment in the campaign, was when they don't go after Heldrungen at that one moment, instead of where I believe they just go on like a weekend or like a week raiding.
Yeah, but that's right, Ray. But if you actually have been to Heldrungen, and it's a moated fortress, right? And if you think about it, the peasants, even the Frankenhausen band and all those around them, they just didn't have the artillery. They didn't have the wherewithal to kind of, mount a major siege. Don't get me wrong. Some of the contemporary literature talks about how and the letters particularly that went back and forth talks about the way in which the princes were those who were holed up in Heldringen for protection were really worried. I mean, they were writing to George of Saxony saying we've only got a few more days. So to that extent there was a fear, but whether the peasants in Frankenhausen had the wherewithal to mount a siege and rout the army that was, and apparently there were hundreds or possibly inside, 1,000 Landsknechts in the basement of that fortress.
Right.
But they were mainly reinforced by an army
Especially
from
the type of artillery it would require. It wouldn't be normal type of artillery.
No, that's right. That absolutely. You're talking about heavy siege pieces, that would not have been. Probably the nearest place might have been somewhere like Nordhausen, where you could have got something.
Some of the cities or towns around, they would have had to have convinced. That's what Hans Sippel was like.
Absolutely,
doing, was trying to get that artillery, right?
Yeah, And
so, I guess.
Do you want to see these figures first?
Yes, I was about to say, before we jump into the game, I want to see the figurines.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether you can get a close-up of...
move them up.
Difficult. There you go.
Nice.
So this is actually called Müntzer's troop, right? And that's him on horseback at the front. The standard bearer is not using the rainbow banner, which I ought to sort out, and I have recently done that. And it's a bunch of about how many figures? 3, 6, 9, 12, about 15 figures in a set.
Gorgeous.
Can you? Yeah, get that a bit closer. So anyway, that's one of them.
That's a tiny part of the collection. So what you reach out to
I mean, if people are interested, if I can get them email somehow, I can send them lists of what I've got. And I've also got a website, www.1525miniatures.net.
That's a very specific URL. I like it.
Yeah, well, I was talking to him the other day, because he models in every bloody century that's given, and I said I can't even get out of 1 year. In 1 year, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just been great. I'll put the website in the chat.
Okay, and I'll bring it to the public chat, so people people want to have a look.
So if you tell them I've got the Frankenhausen title there, where you can get it on eBay.
Yeah,
but that whole millenarianist, or if that's the correct word, that whole period is so absolutely fascinating. And what was a book that's, I guess, almost like a century old now, that started getting me more into it, by Norman Cohn.
Norman Cohn, yeah.
I'm forgetting the name now.
I've got it here. I can tell you the title.
Yeah, I have a copy too. I just can't see it from here. But it's the one that mainly got me interested in this conflict, apart from learning about the war itself. But it covers the whole millenarianist period of like leading up through the Crusades up into this period. It's really fascinating.
Sorry, it's called In Pursuit of the Millennium.
There you go.
It's the one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, but I guess we can probably jump into the game and start looking at how you took that history, Ray, and translated into a game format. Just maybe. So your game is focusing on a like a more intense part of the peasant wars, right? And I'm gonna bring this. Yeah.
In the region that we specifically spoke of, Thuringia. At first, I tried to make the game on the larger war itself, but the war itself, and I think Doug can attest to this, is really fragmented. At one point, like there was very little chance of like armies in Thuringia, peasant armies, making it all the way to South Germany, for example. So I eventually, and there are ways to design a game on a conflict like that, but for me and my literal wargamer brain, I found it much easier once I decided to focus in on a smaller section of it. Then I was able to sort of look, okay, here's a map, here's things that we can do with a map. And so that was how I guess I sort of first came to think about the game. Is it showing now? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I added the TTS to the stream. So maybe you want to give an overview of the map itself.
Sure. So this is the main game board. We're looking at all the major important cities, and you can see some of the peasant bands also that are on the cities here.
And you can see the wonderful rainbow flag in Mulhausen. Yeah.
Right over here. And you might also, these little markers are supposed to represent propaganda markers, so they're like the influence of Thomas Müntzer. And it's funny, I actually based off the placement directly off of like one of the maps in your book, Doug. So thank you for that.
which, by the way, I lifted from one of the original maps provided by some of the German military historians of the day. Back in 1975 in East Germany.
Oh, wow.
You can imagine it was the 450th commemoration, and there was a massive amount of research done then.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I mean, just not 2 days ago, I think Siegfried Hoyer, who was the foremost military historian of the Peasants' War for this period, sadly passed away at 96.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
96 is a good life. It's
good life. Yeah. Good innings. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, what else? Just to quickly, some of these blocks that you're looking at are the noble armies. So Philip of Hesse starts the game on the board. And those are each his little strength numbers. So he can kind of go around the map, basically mustering in strength as he prepares to take on the peasants. And that's really most of what you're looking at the map. It's pretty simple in terms of what you're actually looking at. But what the game runs on victory points, and the way I've sort of structured victory points is sort of like the 12 articles. It's basically if the peasant side gets the victory point all the way to the 20 marker, it basically means that the nobles have sort of acquiesced and accepted the 12 articles of Memmingen. I can't pronounce that. I'm so sorry. I'm going to butcher all of these names by the end of this.
Yeah.
Memmingen.
Yeah.
I'm going to butcher all of these names by the end of this. And if the VP marker gets all the way to 0, then that's sort of like a historical result where the rebellion is crushed, essentially. But a couple other things you're looking at is there's a noble board over here that's just for keeping track of actions taken by the noble player. It's pretty simple. Might look like an action selection mechanic, but it's not. And there is an event deck for, I think you know how to turn these over, right? You could probably use.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring a card up front.
So yeah, we added events to the game that sort of just change the little rules for the turn. There's a random chance of them happening each turn. So those those are the event cards. Oh, these are my favorite pieces. The peasant leader cards. One addition that Fred added to it was that each of the leaders gets like their own special power, sort of related to their history. So Thomas Müntzer sort of gets. I gave him a sermon to the prince's power, which basically allows him to deal with the noble blocks, maybe immobilize them for a turn or two. Um, Whereas Heinrich Pfeiffer is able to place propaganda markers much easier than the other players. I think he does it for free. So there's little bits of asymmetry like that, and this is where you could use miniatures instead of the little pawns we have, essentially. But so the game's pretty simple. You're going to be moving these pawns around this section of Germany, trying to get these little markers to join your card, your peasant leader card. Once you do that, you're sort of able to either take on the nobles, or you can also try and lay a siege at Heldrungen. Every couple turns, the strength of Heldrungen Castle gets more and more and more, but the players have the opportunity to try and raid for extra artillery points. There's ways they can try and raid for extra VPs. So there's a bit of asymmetry. You're going to have nobles running around, mustering for strength, trying to set themselves up in a way to best attack the peasant armies or negotiate with them. They can also negotiate just with the open bands that are on the board and get them to disband, which is what happened half of the time. I mean, without any fights. So
And I guess what we can do is just play a couple of rounds because the game goes fast, so people can see the sequence of play and what players do during a round. If you want, I can take the peasants, and you can take the nobles. And Doug, if you want to be my advisor, I would I would gladly have you as a strategic counsel, and feel free to ask any questions. About the game. And it's interesting. So Winter Quartering here is mentioning the fact that looking at the maps for the different faction, it does remind him of Levian Campaign, which I think was one of the first inspiration, not necessarily for the core game mechanics, but a bit for the feel of the game, right?
Yeah, I struggled for a while actually at how to sort of go about structuring this game, and not so many of the core mechanics as you said, but a lot of the flavor in terms of like areas getting depleted and exhausted. That game really inspired the hell out of me. I played Plantagenet, which is I guess one of the later ones in the series that covers.
Yeah, Plantagenet is the latest. Yeah,
and how that game handled the actions between all of the characters and interacting with the map itself. It really is a what's the word? It's a lovely model of medieval logistics. It's pretty. It's pretty spot on, at least in terms of the way it presents itself. So that sort of allowed me to wrap my head around what these campaigns would actually look like, I guess. And that's probably why some of it looks similar, especially the Noble Action board, which I probably made up after playing a bit of Plantagenet. So.
And if you want, I'll start with Thomas Müntzer on the board,
Okay.
And I'm going to put him in Mulhausen.
Right, he starts in Mulhausen, and we get to. I
And
think we added a rule that puts the Arnstadters in Arnstadt, and Saalfield gets randomly placed. We can just place him anywhere. I think we're ready to go, right?
The sequence of play is pretty straightforward. We are on an odd turn, so we'll go straight into actions. Do you want to maybe talk a bit about what peasants can do on their turn? So they have two action points. Yeah.
Each, I think every player in the game will get 2 action points essentially. And so peasants are allowed to either move adjacent locations. They can inspire different peasant bands, try and get them to join their peasant card, which sort of augments their strength. They can preach, which places propaganda markers onto the board, and those sort of augment a player's attempt to inspire the peasant band. So it's harder for the nobles to put down a peasant band if there's a propaganda marker, for example. Um, they can raid, which is how they acquire artillery and victory points. And artillery is used during battles, or it can be used in trying to lay siege to Heldrungen. Or they can parlay, which is where they temporarily immobilize a noble army, so the noble army can't move for that turn.
And before
So
we
those
talk
are all
about the noble actions, I guess I can take my turn with the peasants, and then we
Right.
can talk about the different
I
action.
keep forgetting that I'm the one sharing the screen, so just for
Yeah,
my
no worries. Do you want me
convenience.
to start sharing the screen so I can so you can focus on the game? Would you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, we were already doing this. We'll
Oh,
just
okay,
keep it as far.
fine. Okay, so I'm here in Mülhausen, and I want to get some better peasant bands because now my strength is 3, and have a nice target in Erfurt. So I'm going to do 1, 2 with my first action. I could move up to 3, but I'm going to stay here.
Okay.
And then I'm going to try to inspire. So do you want to talk a bit about the inspire mechanic and how do I know if I succeed?
So yeah, you checked your leader's zeal rating for Thomas Müntzer. He has the highest possible, which is 4. So you roll 1d6, and if it's equal to or below the zeal rating, it's successful. But we're also going to check the map to see if there's a propaganda marker on the board, which
And
there
there
is.
is.
So that raises his zeal rating to 5. So it's anything but a 6.
Anything but a 6. And if it was not anything but a 6, I could also spend VPs for improving my die roll, right?
Exactly, yeah. So if you wanted to, you could invest more VPs. VPs are like sort of an abstraction of morale and material, if you want to think of it that way.
Okay, I'm gonna hope not to make a 6, and I make a 5. That's
Just
exactly what I need. So that's fine. And I'm gonna add this counter to my player mat, and now I have a force that is becoming a bit of a challenge to the nobles. And those are my 2 actions. So it's back to you, Ray.
So the nobles have a little bit, I think, another action or two that they could do. So they can either muster, which is they increase their army strength. They can gain supply, which they need for movement. That's something we borrowed from Levy and Campaign. Um, they can negotiate, which is basically the equivalent of inspiring. But they can also use negotiate to mess with peasant freelancers. So if there's freelancers on the board, they can attempt to do that. They also can preach, which removes a propaganda marker in an occupied or an adjacent location. They can move up to 2 locations. And then they can also raid, which is another way of getting supply, but drawing supply normally requires leaders to make a leadership check. And if they decide to raid instead, it automatically places a propaganda marker. So there's a bit of asymmetry for that for the noble side. So we'll go back to my turn. And over here, we have a peasant band that's already in Hersfeld. So what I want to first do is try and preach and get rid of this propaganda marker. And I believe the only thing I have to do is just roll d6. And if it's anything but a 5 or a 6, it's successful. So let's see. Oh, okay. So it's a 4. We get rid of that propaganda marker. Put that back in the propaganda tray. And so I have one more action with Philip of Hesse. And I'm going to try and inspire this band to disband. So we will take a look at Philip of Hesse's. Is it influence or leadership? Do you remember? I don't remember.
I believe
Let me
it's
check the rules
influence.
real quick.
Yeah, you can check the
Influence.
rule.
Yeah, let me just double check the rules real quick. I should know my own game better.
But that's expected that game designers make rules mistakes on stream
Yes.
always.
Influence. Okay, so it's in their influence rating. There's no propaganda marker, and I can spend VPs to improve my rating. I want to just do that just to show what it looks like. So I will spend 1 VP. Oh, I have to spend 1 VP anyway, because the nobles always have to spend a victory point whenever they try and negotiate. It's sort of like them putting up their what's the word I'm looking for? Their prestige by negotiating with peasants. So they have to
So
spend one.
1 VP for the action and 1 VP for the DRM.
Yeah, and I'll take. Well, it's not a DRM or it's a. It increases his
Yeah.
influence rating. So his influence is now 4, and I will try rolling. 1. So that's successful. And we place them in the disbanded box on the turn track.
Okay.
So first turn, right?
Yeah. Now we go to turn 2. Things will get spicy now.
All right. So we have the freelancer phase first.
Ray, do you mind if I just ask you a question about the use of the word freelancer? Do you mean mercenaries?
It's also miners, yeah. It's mercenary.
What? Sorry.
It's also miners, so it's either miners or mercenaries.
Okay.
So they just drawn randomly from out of a cup. So first we have to actually roll to see where they'll come in from. And we do that by rolling 2 6-sided dice.
And both sides can access freelancers.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So now we draw. What was that? 12.
So 12 is in salsa.
All right. So we draw. We don't know what it is until one side goes there. So it's drawn face down. Now it's either, I think miners have a strength of 2, and then the mercenaries have a strength of 3. So we'll just flip it over just to show you what they look like.
But we're not supposed to know that. But yeah,
we're not supposed to know that. So that goes to the second turn, right?
Yeah. So that's gonna be my turn again. I'm gonna move. 1, 2, 3. And I have a special ability with Thomas Müntzer. I have Sermon to the Prince. So I may perform a free party action. So here I'm going to try to influence the noble that is adjacent to immobilize it for a turn.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to spend, so my influence rating is, so it's a free action, but the influence rating is quite low. So I think I'm going to spend 2 VPs to increase my roll, to increase my influence to 4. And if I roll a 4 or lower, you're going to be immobilized for a turn. And that's a complete failure.
So that's no good.
So that's not cool. That's and I guess that
you should have one more action, right?
Yeah, I have one more action because this was a free action. So I think I'm going to try to preach because I can preach in adjacent. So I'm going to try to preach back in Hersfeld. So here I have.
Oh yeah, is it automatic?
No, preach is. I have to roll my zeal. I believe.
Let me double check because I think it might be automatic.
Oh, you changed it. How dare you?
No, I don't think so. Place a propaganda marker in an adjacent locale.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that's perfect. That's even better. So
that Heinrich Pfeiffer gets to do that for free. Essentially, that's the difference.
So I'm putting back a propaganda marker that might be useful for the next round. And now I'm actually stuck next to you. So you could come and strike, but will you do this or not? Who knows?
Yeah, I think I want to first. Let's see. Why don't I muster first, just to make it worse for you if I do decide to strike? So I will muster for my first action, which brings me to a 9, and I have to then. Where's the marker? There it is. I have to deplete the city. Now, I could decide to try and rid the propaganda marker that's there, but I'm going to need supply if I want to move. So, let's see. I think I will instead, I'm going to exhaust the city and draw supply. So I think we flip that to its exhausted side. Now this city can be no longer used for mustering or supply, but I do get 2 supply tokens, which I can use to move.
1 greedy noble. Yeah.
That's the end of the second turn, right?
That's the end of the second turn, so we can go into round 3.
All right.
Actually, at the end of the round, I can spend some VPs to move. Yeah, and I think I'm gonna start spending 2 to move this 2 down. So I start getting a shot. I don't need it to come too early because I think you're gonna move out of Hersfeld, and I want you to be out before this one comes back into play. So just 2 VPs. So I'm gonna be a bit cautious here.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think what I'm gonna do another time, I'm gonna try to to party once again, and I'm gonna spend
for the new turn.
Yeah, for the new turn. So I'm gonna spend an extra VP. So I'm gonna be able to immobilize you on 3 or lower, and hope that I'm not gonna roll a 6 this time. Yes.
There you go.
Nice. So now it means that I'm a bit more flexible with my actions. So I'm going to do 1, 2 for my first action. I'm going to move, and I'm going to try to convince those freelancers to actually join me. So that's going to be an inspire action for me.
That's a
and yeah, that's going to be a zeal roll. And
he has a zeal of 4.
Yeah, zeal of 4 is actually pretty cool. So I think I'm going to keep it this way. And in this case, the propaganda doesn't impact anything, right? If I'm going for the freelancers.
No, it does raise your zeal to 5.
Okay, so I have good chances of succeeding. Yes, that was close, but it is. And now I would reveal what the freelancers are, and I realize that it's a 2. So I now have a strength of 8, which makes me pretty powerful.
Yeah, but I'm still a 9. But I can't move.
No, you can't move this turn. You're stuck on an exhausted city. So yeah,
I completely exhausted the city I was in, and I have no more nobles moving in this turn. So I just completely screwed myself. That's the end of turn 3.
So that's the end of turn 3. So as you can see, it's pretty fast paced. Yeah.
Yeah, a full game should really only take like less than 90 minutes. If you're learning your first time, I imagine maybe around 90 minutes, but that's probably on the long end. But so now on this turn, we would do the freelancer phase, but also John the Steadfast comes in rather than, I'm going to butcher the German name, so I'll just say the English variant. And we have a freelancer roll again. So we'll see where they come in. 63, that means, I believe that's an event card.
Yeah, 63 means you draw an event. Yeah.
So let's see what the event is. The Christian Brotherhood. All peasant attempts to negotiate with freelancers are automatically successful this time. That would have been good to draw a little bit earlier, but...
Well, the thing is that a freelancer is going to come anyway, so that's...
It's true.
So maybe I'm going to be lucky.
So 14 is...
Erfurt.
Oh, yeah, you are going to be lucky.
And I'm going to be here, so that's going to be an automatic success. I'm happy with that.
Oh, yeah, you did get lucky.
Okay, so I like this event, and I'm going to take full advantage of it. So I'm going to move here with my first action. And then because of the Christian Brotherhood, I'm going to negotiate the freelancers, and I'm going to get this. Ooh. Oh, those are big.
So now you got a nice stack down there.
Yeah, so if I look, so I have 6 in peasant bands, 5 in freelancers, so that puts me at 11, which makes me a force to recon with. So I'm pretty happy with this. And that's my turn. It's going to go back to you, but now you have 2 nobles to activate, so that's going to be a bit more tricky for me.
Yeah, now I can at least finally do something. I mean, you're far enough away from John the Steadfast that I can kind of just use him as a mopping up force. So I'm going to send him to fold up. Oh, he needs supply, though. God. Okay, so he's going to...
You've got problems, yeah.
He's going to take a supply action, but we forgot to do a leadership roll for the supply action. So let's try that.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just on the Johann move. I mean, historically, he was very reluctant to get involved and didn't until very late in the day. In fact, he joined the fray after Frankenhausen, and I wonder if maybe you've got that in I don't know what kind of card it would be, but just it would be quite interesting that it would frustrate you moving anywhere. We know that he took on the Bildhausen band. That was almost the last event in the Thuringian theatre. But I'm wondering if that would be a possible kind of intervention where that move might be frustrated by a chance card or something, or a kind of I don't know what in your deck of cards.
It's kind of funny because I think it just happens naturally because since he can't move first until he draws supply, so he's going to be stuck.
Okay.
For at least one turn. But I
Right.
think we could maybe also always just introduce another, because you wanted to introduce maybe a couple more events. We still have, still introduce a couple events into it that would maybe make him more reluctant on a turn. So it's like he's instead caught by his own fear and he is immobilized for a turn.
Yeah.
I mean, the other intervening variable would be, particularly on the supply thing, is a real difficulty in recruiting freelance mercenaries. Which is what they had, particularly George of Saxony had big problems, right? So again, it's whether you want, and maybe you've already got that built in, or maybe you want to introduce other possible cards or whatever you want to call it.
Because they have the lower of the two leadership ratings, or let's see.
Yeah, we could lower George of Saxony to reflect that.
Yeah. We could lower his influence rate.
Yeah, you could do something on the supply of George of Saxony, and in the case of Johann, the middle guy there, the Steadfast, I think he's called.
Yes,
maybe something that he's just a bit late. He's reluctant to kind of get involved.
And I think that we can bake that into the events. We wanted to add some events, so we can probably add one, and then for George, we can lower his influence and make it harder for him to recruit freelancers, which is already baked into the system, but we can reflect it better. So it would be nice. But yeah, you have to supply with him anyway.
Right. So let me do that supply action. Did I roll? No. Oh, that's a failure. Oh, great. All right, so I'll raid. I will raid the territory for the supply, but that's going to place a propaganda marker.
That's nice.
So we deplete it. They get propaganda, but I take my supply the hard way. There we go. Gotta crack a couple eggs sometimes to make an omelet. So we will next try and, I think, disperse a Waraband, because that's the one it's the only other 3 left on the board, and I can move 2 spaces. So I will use my first action to move. And I'm not even going to bother trying to get rid of the propaganda marker this time. I'm just going to spend my VP. And I'm gonna roll. It's bad.
Oh, wait a minute. Spend the VP on the. It goes the other way.
It goes down for the leaders.
Yeah, but you spend the VP.
Yeah. You're right. Sorry.
Ray's cheating. I'm just saying. You've got it on. I caught it on camera. He's cheating.
You did. Now, what was I doing?
You were trying to disband the peasant band over there.
So he's we got the propaganda that's no good, but if I got a 1 or a 2, no, that's a failure. That's just a complete loss of a turn, except for the movement.
Oh, I like it. Wait a minute. I'm gonna spend a VP to keep decreasing this.
Okay.
And
Then
now
we
we go
move to
to
turn 4
yeah.
or 5. So that means George of Saxony enters at Dresden, or Leipzig, I'm sorry.
And now I'm starting to get surrounded. But you know
Now it's
what?
gonna be changes.
I feel powerful. Yeah, I'm gonna. What should I do? I think I'm gonna start to do. I'm gonna try to do to place a propaganda, and that's gonna be instant success. I'm gonna place a propaganda in Weimar.
Okay.
Just because I have an action available, because my second action is going to be 1 and 2, and I'm going to come in to confront you.
Okay, here we go. So what strength are you at now total?
So I'm at 6, 9, 11, and you are at 9.
Oh God. Okay, so let's see.
It's not great. I'm at 1 to 1, but still.
Yeah, no, 1 to 1, but at least it's something.
It's actually
so
pretty
you're
bad.
Yeah, it is. But you have artillery. You can spend artillery. And do you have a higher leadership rating? Probably not.
Probably not. No, my leadership is 3, and I believe your leadership is 4. Yeah, your leadership is 4. So you have a.
So you don't get the DRM there, but you do get a +1 if you spend artillery.
And for the winter quartering question, so when peasant bands are disbanded, they go into this disbanded box. And at the end of each turn, I can spend some VPs to move it down. And when the game turn reaches one of those units, it comes back onto the board. So it's just a way for me to make sure that I have peasant bands coming back. So I'm spending VPs to bring back peasant bands on the board after they've been disbanded by the nobles. So that's
and
what
I
I'm.
should say that mechanic is a little ahistorical, but we found it kind of necessary for the
Yeah.
game to kind of make sense. Otherwise, it would just become the board would empty fairly quickly. So this is a way to keep things interesting, also.
So we're on one. I don't really have a DRM for. I don't have any advantage for leadership, but I do have cannons. So maybe you want to give us an overview of the combat system.
If you had, let's just pretend if we had another player playing or something. Let's say Hans Sippa was in play, and let's pretend that he was in Oberhof. You would then get a bonus for that. So we may as well give you a +2.
Yeah. Okay.
But the way combat works is basic wargaming's, fair. You total up each side and you create a ratio of attacking to defending, and then we present to you 2 different combat result tables. There is a peasant combat result table and a peasant combat result table and a noble combat result table. It's giving you a series of odds. It's pretty simple. So the AR with a capital R stands for attacker or defender routed. The small r is for retreat, and then the EX is for an exchange. Routing is like the main mechanic in this game, I think, where a lot of the rolling happens. So we'll see what happens. We're going to roll 1d6. We got a +2.
Yeah. And I can spend artillery also, I guess.
Yeah, you can spend an artillery point. I believe you have 2 of those.
I'm going to spend 1.
Yeah, you can only spend 1.
Yeah. So I'm going to have a +3 die roll in this case.
+2, I think.
Right. How many? What's my DRM for having an adjacent leader?
Oh, I have to double check that, but I'm not sure. What was it? I thought, was it only +1? I thought.
I don't remember.
I think it's only +1.
Oof, that's gonna be. So I'm just illustrating the combat system. It wouldn't be a good combat for me to engage in.
Yeah, so no, this is not. Don't try this at home.
Yeah, we're professionals here. So it's only on a 6 that it wouldn't be a complete failure. So that's pretty unlikely, but we'll see how it goes. And look at that!
Look at that!
Look at that!
All right,
Yes.
so you got an 8 on. That's a defender retreat. So I'm gonna lose 2 VPs for retreating. Like a peasant.
Exactly.
Retreat to
away.
2 areas.
Yeah.
So I'll treat to full. No, because I want to send Johan there after. So back to Hersfeld. God, that sucks.
Yeah.
But that's how the combat system works. Anything can happen.
And I think that's my turn. I did my 2 actions. Yeah, and so that's back to you.
Okay, let's see. Well, now that Johan has some supply, first he'll move to Fulda. For his first action, he has to spend that supply to move. Is there a propaganda marker there?
Yep.
So he'll spend, let's see if he pisses off the peasants preaching that away. Anything with a 5 or a 6.
Oh,
So I lose another VP marker. The peasants are angry.
as they should.
Oh, and the propaganda marker stays.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
Great.
I'm gonna put it back.
There. Good enough. Good enough for rock and roll.
And now you've got the big loser, Philip.
Yeah. And what the hell is he gonna do? Oh, did he move previously?
Yeah, he
so
should have only 1 supply. Yeah.
So I think he's gonna have to move to Vaca. And
You don't want to come and fight?
no, not really. And here he will muster. So we'll deplete the area. And he will muster to a 12.
Okay, that's going to be a bit more problematic. And at the end of the turn, I would spend 1, 2, 3 VPs to bring this back.
So they would re-enter on this.
And they would re-enter in here at the end of the round, at the beginning of the round. And I think that's we can probably stop here. We're
pretty much shows off the game.
Yeah, halfway through the game. I think once you know the rules, it plays in 90 minutes. Also, it depends how many peasant leaders you're going to have brought on the table. The more peasants leaders you have, and it's also a good way to change the level of difficulty or for the peasants to actually being able to put up a fight. I think the more peasants you have, the more things you can do. And
basically, the more peasants that are on the board, or the more people playing the peasant side, the more of a chance that they sort of have, because they have the chance to cooperate where nobody actually could cooperate. I have to put in a rule that says if there's more than one peasant player, they can't talk to one another unless they're in the same town. On the map,
or unless they send a pony, and
unless they send a pony, yes. They could send notes to one another and then open it on the next turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that could be actually
something like that.
Quite depending on the distance. I think you could have for every 3 locals, it takes 1 turn to get to them.
Right.
But yeah, so that's the flow of the game. As you might have heard, speaking with Doug, we're still doing some minor adjustments, but I think the flow is there. The core rules are there, and as you said earlier, it's supposed to be like a very entry level game to highlight.
It's sort of like a thematic war game. Right?
Yeah,
or a strategy game, but it's still a war game, but it's not just a straight up, you're not bean counting as you would in most war games.
Yeah, you have no hexes, you have no zones of control, so a lot of the complexity is out of it. You just have to, when you're playing the nobles, you do have to think about like supply and how you deplete the different areas. So you do have some more operational questions that you ask yourself.
And when you're going to spend VPs, I think we make that like an option on almost all the actions. So it's really you're sort of how much do I want to leverage my prestige, or how I'm winning or losing so far. But it could be the game kind of swings in either direction. But it can swing wildly either way at any time, especially with a combat being worth 2 VPs just for a retreat result.
Yeah,
and I think also there's if one side gets routed, there's a chance that you earn tons of VPs, depending if you have like two different peasant bands routed, you could earn 5 VPs in a single battle.
Like a decisive battle could actually bring the game to an end. Yeah.
Right. And that's
What's
sort of
it?
like a survival.
Yeah. What's a VP again? A victory point.
A victory point. Victory point. Yeah.
Point. It's
So-
sort of
Then another observation or suggestion.
Sure.
Every town that you have listed, it might be worth. I think you already need to kind of build in, were these peasant-friendly towns? So that if you decide to move, if you're on the peasant side, if you decide to move to that town, maybe you can't get in, right? I mean, that was the fate of Hans Sippel in Eisenach, right? He wanted cannon. They let him in, but then the council decided he was a traitor and they had him beheaded. So, but there was other places where they just refused to open the gates. So that might restrict your movement around the board a bit.
And I guess that could be what the propaganda marker also does. So you can only move through or stop in areas that have propaganda markers.
Oh, that would actually make that would make sense. That the peasant leaders can't stop in a space without a propaganda marker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it would make the movement a bit more restrictive, and it would make it more important to remove it when you're a noble, because you're basically blocking what peasants can do.
Oh, I like that. This is why we pay Fred the big bucks.
Or alternatively, you could have let's call it a chance card or something where it just says, we've been able, let's say that there isn't a propaganda card on a location, but you pick up some kind of chance card and it says, you've managed to find a way in. You struck up a deal with some of the council members or something,
An event could remove that restriction for a whole turn.
I think there is an event that Hans Sippel gets beheaded too.
Yeah.
So of course, obviously, if you pull that card up, that's him gone. That's him gone, and his band's basically gone. The wearer band.
Sometimes that just happens. You want to get a gun or two, and you lose your head.
Yeah.
Process.
That's just war. That's just war. But that's great. Actually, it's good to have those sessions live. So we're actually doing a bit of live development.
A little bit of live dev.
Yeah. I think it's pretty cool. And just maybe a note for people watching, the BGG page was just approved. So if you go on BGG and look for With the Hammer, you will see there is nothing on it yet because it was just approved, but some images have been added. So we're going to populate it with content. So if you go on Board Game Geek, you will have some more information. I'm going to post this video up there. And if you have questions to Ray or I about the game, please let us know. And on my side, I also did a call for playtesters because I think once we've done the latest version of the material and the rules, it would be nice to have some blind playtest. So if you're on my Discord server or if you're in contact with Ray, reach out, because it would be nice to have some blind playtest, just making sure that all the content is good for people when they open the box. Maybe, Ray, do you have any idea of when you want the game to be released and sent out to people?
Yeah, we're hoping that, I'm hoping, because CSL is only me, the editorial we. I'm hoping to release it early in January, not too early, so figure sometime in the third week, maybe. That would be my ideal goal, maybe around the 21st. Depending on if we can get it done by then. It will take as long as it takes, but I like to work quickly. So that's my goal for it, and we're going to be testing it up until then, because since we're print on demand, we can change things on the fly, which is one thing I love about print on demand.
That makes the whole process
print.
Yeah, quite easy. But yeah, so early next year. Yeah.
Fredo, do you want to make the private chat public? There's 3 kind of things there that folk might.
Oh, so I've posted those 3 links in the chat already, but I will also add them in the description. In the description of the video. So when they, because the people who are in the live chat will have seen it, but I think it's good that I put it in the description. So for people who are not watching us live, I would have added the links in the description, so you'll have the website to Doug's website, the link to the book, and the different stuff that we talked about. So you'll find everything in description. But yeah, that was great. Ray,
thank you so much for showing up and joining us on this. I really appreciate it.
And
last minute.
Yeah, that was awesome to have you with us, Doug. I think it's it's really cool.
Baptism of fire for me. It's the first live stream thing I've taken part in, and first game. And a quick question. I mean, is this? I'm old school, right? I'm used to kind of board games, like cardboard board games with counters and things. Is this going to be like an online thing? I mean, I'm fascinated.
No. It's gonna come in a box like this,
okay.
Which is another of Ray's games. So you're gonna have actual cardboard and counters. So you're gonna have a physical object that you can play with. Right. We use this online implementation because it's very practical for us for playtest. Because we can change the content on the fly and try it. Yeah. And Ray and I are pretty far away. It's hard for me to drop by and play.
Yeah.
So it's easier for us to do it online. But it would be a
congratulations to the designer, by the way, the graphic designer. Quite apart from the other designer, Ray. Because it looks really good.
Thank you. Yeah, the artist, we should mention him, Ilya Kudryashov, who does the art for all my games. He's a virtuoso.
He's very good.
He's done a lot of great, he's worked on a lot of great games, specifically for indie publishers. So a really cool artist. Probably I should have him on the show at some point to talk about his work. And Ray, I think you need to come back so we can play this.
Yeah,
because I still haven't played it, the Great Northern War, which is something that I think is interesting. It's a trick-taking war game, Ray. So that sounds familiar.
About those, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I beat you to putting that out.
Well, we don't really have so with Phalanx, it's not exactly the same timelines because it's not as indie as CSL. It's not
No, of course. That's why I kind of got into this, is because I just couldn't. I had no patience to wait around for publishers to publish my games. So I was just like, screw this, I'm doing it.
And I would be curious also to feature. So I have an interest in the Korean War, and I think one of your first game was on the Korean War. Yeah, so I think it would be great. I would like to feature a few CSL war games coming next year. So that would be nice. But we can talk about this offline. But for people watching, subscribe and expect to have more of Ray coming over. Now that he's over his anxiety of being on stream because everything went super well, it's going to be fine. And I think we actually got Doug hooked. So Doug, if you want to come and actually try some of our weird war games for a live stream, you're more than welcome. You're also invited. Let me know. But it was great to have you on. I'm
happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and for everyone watching, there are a couple of videos that would be released during the holiday season coming up. So expect some more videos, but we won't have streams before the 5th of January. So 5th of January, we're coming back with streams, and we're going to play a card game called World Breakers, which is a bit unusual, but quite interesting. So I hope you enjoy this. And we have some pretty cool content planned up for the beginning of next year. One big stream that I'm really looking forward to about the historical roots of factions in Root. So we'll talk about this with the designers. So that could be quite fun, but I'll let you know more about this coming up. Feel free to follow me on different social media. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter if you want to have some updates. So follow me up there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening and see you soon.
Good to finally see you in the flesh, as it were, Ray.
Good to see you, Doug. Thank you so much.
Nice meeting you, Fredo. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.